Now, during our interviews, we asked companies who takes ownership of sexual harassment prevention within your company. And as the chart shows, almost all companies reported that their HR departments take ownership of prevention. Nearly 85% of CEOs take ownership of prevention, and around 78% of executives other than the CEO also take ownership of preventing sexual harassment within their workplace. Now, during our research, we came across evidence that suggests that when managers and employees, quote, act as guardians against sexually harassing behavior, sexual harassment behavior decreases throughout an organization. And we took this guardianship to also equate with ownership of prevention. Now, our data shows that 56% of the companies that we spoke to also said that their managers take ownership of sexual harassment prevention. Now, considering our data and what external research shows, we wanted to dig in a little bit more to these particular firms and see what that ownership construct looked like. And what we found is that companies who say that their CEO takes ownership of preventing sexual harassment within the company, only 63% also say that their managers take ownership. And we felt that CEO ownership is particularly important given how important tone at the top is for setting culture, for setting a precedent within an organization. But it appears that this alone is not enough to drive prevention ownership throughout an organization. So the next bucket that we found was that for companies that said compliance owns sexual harassment prevention, 89% of companies said that managers also own sexual harassment prevention. And while a step in the right direction, we found a little bit more. For companies that said that diversity and inclusion owns sexual harassment prevention, 93% of companies also said that managers own it. And this has implications for companies in devising some environmental construct for sexual harassment prevention. It suggests that multiple parties should be involved in an ecosystem of sexual harassment prevention, and that diversity and inclusion is perhaps best equipped to drive prevention ownership among multiple parties within an organization. Now, we also asked companies about a dialogue regarding #MeToo and sexual harassment prevention in general. And what we found was that 64% of companies said that HR tends to drive this conversation. 55% of companies said that their CEO or other executives drive this conversation. And 12% of companies said that they don't have this discussion within their company. And one reason that we saw for this was that this has become a highly politicized issue. And some companies simply feel that it would be offensive to have this type of discussion within the confines of their workplace. And that is understandable. But open dialogue is important for people to feel comfortable to discuss issues when those issues arise in real time, particularly sexual harassment in the workplace. For example, if a manager or supervisor has been open about discussing #MeToo in the workplace, then an employee of that supervisor may feel more confident coming to them when an issue actually occurs. We believe this aspect of open dialogue is tied directly to prevention ownership, as it's hard to prevent something that is not discussed openly. And as one company stated during our interviews, we don't leave what's going on in the world out in the parking lot. We bring it with us into the workplace, so we need to talk about it. One other aspect of leadership that we wanted to address, but unfortunately our sample size was too restrictive for us to dig into explicitly, was the role of female senior leadership in an organization. We did find a study from the American Psychological Association which suggests that employee willingness to report sexual harassment behavior and to confront coworkers about that type of behavior increases when there are female senior leaders within an organization. Now, with regards to leadership recommendations, leadership diversity is becoming increasingly important. When we consider what we've observed through our research and through the research of others, we believe there's a clear benefit to increasing the gender parity in the leadership ranks of an organization. The benefits range from increased employee comfort in reporting sexual harassment behavior to increased level of sexual harassment prevention within an organization. We recommend organizations pursue gender parity in this regard. Further, we believe that sexual harassment prevention ownership among managers is key to preventing sexual harassment within an organization. We also recommend that leaders facilitate and lead discussions on this topic, as it is something that's happening in the real world, and like our interviewee said, we don't leave what's going on in the real world in the parking lot.